Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino, he has changed his words on his testimony in terms of where they got the advice. Essentially, when he was asked, here's what he said. He says that the government received advice to invoke the Emergencies Act, and he was questioned multiple times in committee as well as by the opposition parties in terms of who exactly gave that advice. And prior to that, well, Mendicino, once when he was leaving a cabinet meeting, he said to the media, he said, the advice we received was to invoke the Emergencies Act. And then he said that he insinuated that he received it from the police, that they're the ones who had asked. So it says here, appearing before the committee in April, so Mendicino repeatedly said the government was acting on the advice of law enforcement and that the police advised using the Emergencies Act. This is what Mendicino said. He's the public safety minister, saying that the government followed the advice of law enforcement and that the police advised to use the Emergencies Act. The police do not have the ability to invoke the Emergencies Act, only the government does, MPs, based on a vote. This was all of the Liberal Party, backed by the NDP, to be able to pass it. And since then, it's been revealed by the RCMP Commissioner, Brenda Lickie, and other law enforcement, such as the Ottawa Police Chief Steve Bell, who took after Peter Slowly had stepped down. They both denied asking the government to use the act. Now, take a look at RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lickie's testimony in the special committee.
The emergency measure regulations supplemented existing authorities and provided new instruments for law enforcement to address these illegal blockades. So let's look at some concrete examples. First, police were able to maintain a secure perimeter throughout the National Capital Region and refuse entry of individuals traveling to the illegal protest with the intent of participating. Second, supporting an illegal assembly was also prohibited, and police had the enforcement authority to arrest individuals who continue to supply fuel, food, and other materials to an area of an unlawful assembly. And third, there were new powers to compel individuals to provide essential goods and/or services for the removal, towing, and storage of vehicles and equipment. I delegated these powers to the OPP, who used them to secure needed equipment to clear the streets of Ottawa. The goal was to bring a safe and swift end to the illegal blockade. I believe that we all effectively achieved this objective, and I want to thank all the police officers from all law enforcement agencies who joined this operation.
Do you believe the Emergencies Act was necessary and that it met the threshold and it was a national emergency and it was legal and it met the requirements and could not be dealt with under any existing law? Yes or no?
Well, it's not for me to answer whether we met the threshold.
Well,
That's
your
for the
opinion
government
matters. Your Commissioner,
I can
your
tell you how
opinion
we
does
used
matter.
it.
I know how you used it.
I could tell you how we used it.
We know how you used it. Thank you.
So here we have it so far. We have Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino saying that they invoked the Emergencies Act on the advice and the request of law enforcement. The RCMP Commissioner, as well as the Ottawa Police Chief, said they did not ask the government to invoke the Emergencies Act. And Justice Minister David Lametti has repeatedly invoked cabinet confidentiality in his appearance at the Special Joint Committee. And that's where things stand in terms of getting an answer. And since then, we've had Deputy Minister Rob Stewart appear before the Special Joint Committee, and essentially he spoke on what everyone's trying to make out of what Marco Mendicino has meant with his testimony on the police and law enforcement requesting it and them saying, no, we did not request this. Well, it seems that now the Deputy Minister, Rob Stewart, is speaking on behalf of Marco Mendicino, saying that this is his statement here, saying Stewart said Mendicino didn't mean police directly asked for the law to be used. And this is his statement, I'm quoting, I believe that the intention that he was trying to express was that law enforcement asked for the tools that were contained in the Emergencies Act. This is what Deputy Minister Stewart said. And there's been pushback in terms of understanding what this misunderstanding is for Marco Mendicino, who's the Minister of Public Safety. I'm going to take you to a clip of the Shadow Minister of Public Safety, Raquel Dancho, as she questions the Minister, Marco Mendicino, on this misunderstanding as the opposition parties are trying to figure out what the misunderstanding is, as well as the media, to clarify why the Emergencies Act was invoked. Take a look.
The Honourable Member for Kildonan St. Paul.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Public Safety knows the severity of invoking the Emergencies Act, the historical significance, the impact on due process and charter rights. The details of why and how this government invoked the act are key. They will set a precedent in Canada on government powers, Mr. Speaker. And I'm sure the Minister would agree there is no room for being misunderstood when setting historical precedent. There is also no room for hiding cabinet documents from Justice Rouleau's inquiry. Will the Liberal government waive cabinet confidence and release the documents to Justice Rouleau?
The Honourable Minister.
As we said all along, the government will cooperate with Justice Rouleau, will cooperate with the Joint Parliamentary Committee to be transparent, because I agree with my colleague that we need to scrutinize the invocation of the Emergencies Act, Mr. Speaker. My point is that the facts are very clear. We were in the midst and in the throes of an unprecedented public order emergency in the opinion of nonpartisan professional law enforcement, and when we sought their advice about which powers were needed to restore public safety, we listened to it and we invoked to restore public safety, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Kildonan St. Paul.
The Minister's being a bit vague on my question of whether his government's going to release the documents, and the question of cabinet confidence is critical to the Rouleau inquiry, as argued by former clerk of the Privy Council, who said cabinet confidence, quote, should not be utilized to impede the search of the truth where the validity of government action is seriously contested, and the law demands that it be reviewed, as is the case with the recent declaration of emergency in response of the trucker convoy protests and blockade. So in other words, this is a really big deal, Mr. Speaker. Will the Liberals respect Justice Rouleau's request and hand over the cabinet documents, yes or no?
Great question. The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, when we invoked the Emergencies Act, we did it to restore public safety after we sought the advice of law enforcement, Mr. Speaker. Following that, we commenced the public inquiry, giving
I'm sure the Honourable Member for Kildonan St. Paul missed the first part, so maybe start right from the top, Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we invoked the Emergencies Act to restore public safety. We did it following the conversations and consultations that we had with law enforcement, including on which powers were needed to restore public safety. At the conclusion of it, we revoked the Emergencies Act, and as part of that, we're now participating in an exercise of transparency, including with Judge Rouleau, who has the power to compel witnesses, documents, including classified information. Of course, the government will cooperate because we agree that the Act should be scrutinized so that it is never abused, Mr. Speaker, and we will always follow that principle. Thank you.
That's Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino answering in the House of Commons on questions about invoking the Emergencies Act. This is going to go down in history. It's going to be part of Canadian history. It was invoked for the first time ever since it became law. And now the question is, was it useful? Was it necessary to be able to deal with the blockades and the protesters? Did the police not have enough powers as it is to be able to deal with it? Now, there has been recent estimates of how much it's cost the city of Ottawa. It was estimated at first that it was about a little over $1 million a day, the cost to the city to deal with the protesters and the blockades. And essentially now the estimate's sitting at $37 million as this committee continues and testimony is heard by all the key people that are involved in making those decisions for the Emergencies Act. Well, we're going to follow up on this and make sure that you, the viewer, the voter, are aware of what's happening in Ottawa. I'm Ramona Singh. This is Y Media Political Sensex.